What's going on to all my friends, family, and supporters out there for another episode of my weekly sports talk podcast? Today is October 18th, 2023. Unfortunately, there were nothing too interesting out there for some fun holidays. Um, National Cupcake Day was kind of the only intriguing one. I don't really mess with cupcakes. A couple notes though is we do have some nice birthdays out there. Happy birthday, Brittany Griner. Possibly part of one of the worst trades in the history of sports. So shout out to her. Shout out to Zach Efron. Actually, one of my favorite actors and a guy that I guess if I had to have a man crush, it would probably be on Zach Efron. Grew up watching him in High School Musical. Was always a fan of him in that. He was pretty good in the Neighbors movies. Thought those were pretty funny. He's got this like nature documentary series on Netflix where he's absolutely fried off his ass. That's pretty entertaining. And he's coming up in a movie here called The Iron Lung about the Von Erichs professional wrestling story. Absolutely sad story. I'm excited to see that movie. It will probably make me cry. Happy birthday, Rachel Nichols. I hope you have a terrible birthday. You absolutely did the Timberwolves really dirty when you were working with Jimmy Butler to absolutely shit on our franchise. So, hope your birthday sucks, Rachel Nichols. And happy birthday to Baby Bash, otherwise known as the guy that sang Sugar Sugar How'd You Get So Fly? Underrated song from the early 2000s, I believe it was. But without further ado, let's get into business here. Usually these YouTube videos come out on Tuesday. It was feeling a little bit under the weather yesterday, so we pushed it back to today. Um, so while that is an excuse for why it wasn't out yesterday, I have no excuses for my performance over the weekend on what we had for betting. It was the toughest weekend we've had ever since I've started this YouTube channel. Nothing seemed to go right for us, and I hate when that happens, man. It's a tough feeling when everything seems to be going wrong for you. Our college football plays went 1-4 to move all time to a 13-9 record. However, we are still up 7.42 units, which is pretty respectable right there. Meanwhile, NFL again went 1-3. It moves to 6-11-1 on the year with a negative 5.57 units. I don't really know what's going on there. I feel like I watch a lot more NFL than I do college football, yet for whatever reason, I can't seem to get an indication of what's going on there. In fact, I'll actually start talking about those bets. Um, I look at the Bills minus, I believe it was 14 and a half against the Giants on Sunday Night Football. It seems like that should be a no-brainer, and instead we get one of the worst games of the year. That was a fucking terrible game. Buffalo sleptwalked through that entire game. The Giants looked brain dead. I don't really know what Brian Dable was doing running the ball right before halftime. I can't believe the Buffalo Bills didn't cover that game. That one really stings. Another one that really stings was we took the San Francisco 49ers minus 10 over the Browns, and they actually lost to the Browns. San Francisco 49ers lost to the Cleveland Browns. Cleveland Browns did not have their starting quarterback or their starting running back. That's football, I guess, man. I mean, the Niners just got done shit pumping the Cowboys and can't beat the Browns. I don't really know how we can prepare for that one, but when Trent Williams, Christian McCaffrey, Debo Samuel go down, you can kind of understand why the Niners struggled a little bit, but that's still a game that they need to take care of business in. Upset about that one. And then the other loss was the Seahawks game against the Bengals. Um, that was one of those situations. If they were playing for the cover instead of playing for the win, it would have hit. Obviously, teams don't really do that as they shouldn't. The goal is to win, not to cover. But that was a good game. They could have, should have, would have covered. I still have a lot of faith in the Seahawks as a team, and I think that Joe Burrow is finally starting to get a little bit more comfortable for the first time this season. Played well last week against Arizona, looked a little bit better this week against the Bengals. They have a bye this week and a tough schedule for coming out of that bye. So now or never for Joe Burrow. But the big win we did have was the Raiders. I told you I am going to fade the Patriots every single week until it doesn't work, and it was really close to not working. However, in peak Patriots fashion, the reason we are fading them, they take a late safety, Mac Jones, no pocket presence, Max Crosby, the guy you have to know where he's at all times. If there's anyone on the Raiders defense you need to keep an eye on, it is Max Crosby. Doesn't know where he's at, gets a safety, gives us a last second cover there. So shout out to the Raiders for that, and shout out to the Patriots. Dude, they are terrible, and like I said, we will continue to fade them each and every week. Um, Moving over to college football, though, usually I've absolutely dominated the college football realm. My underdog money lines have been really hot, and they were not at all this week. In fact, they were rather cold. We were on BYU, and they were absolutely terrible. Um, I must have missed a very public message on that one. I don't know. I feel like everyone else must have had the news except for me, but TCU's backup quarterback came in and he was electric. He actually had the highest pro football focus grade of any college quarterback this week. Um, yeah, I don't know. I just figured no quarterback for TCU. BYU's not that bad of a team, and they got absolutely destroyed and was never really close. They were never really in it. Staying in the Big 12, I was also on the KU spread, and they looked good for the beginning of the game and eventually choked it out. Obviously, they're playing with Jason Bean, the backup quarterback, and he showed flashes, but he also had some turnovers that hurt the team. And we're excited to get Daniels back, hopefully, for KU, as he's probably a bit better of a quarterback than Jason Bean, although they both bring similar attributes there. Um, the other one that I was very disappointed about was Cal against Utah. I thought Cal had a chance to win that game. We took them to cover, and instead they just played like absolute dog shit. Their defense was horrendous. Utah's offense has been bad all year long, and this was by far the best offensive game Utah's had of the season. So when you think about that, that's a real bummer there. We did hit Mizzou, which felt good. I felt pretty confident going into that one anyway. Kentucky's not very good. I don't think they deserve to be ranked the way they were, and they took care of business on that one. Mizzou's a pretty talented football team. This is probably their best team they've had since they've joined the SEC, I'd say. We'll see how the season finishes off, but right now I feel pretty good about that. And then the one I want to touch the most on here is USC against Notre Dame. That game, although USC was the underdog, I didn't think they would get, but like they just got creamed. I didn't think it'd be they'd get creamed as bad as they did, but Caleb Williams might be on fraud alert. He's obviously just won the Heisman last year. He's a favorite to maybe win the Heisman again this year. But I saw an interesting stat where it's talking about Caleb Williams versus top 25 defenses in his career, and he struggled mightily, mightily. The 2021 game, I believe it was against Okie State, was about the only game in which he was halfway decent against a good defense. But you go back, 2021 against Baylor, he was 9 of 18, had two interceptions. 2001 against Iowa State, 8 of 18, only 87 passing yards, one interception to one touchdown. And then obviously this year against Notre Dame, he had one touchdown to three interceptions. That's not a ratio that you're really looking to have if you want to win football games. And it kind of makes you wonder what it means for Caleb Williams at the next level. The reports have started coming out that he wants partial ownership of any team that drafts him. However, obviously all these NFL defenses are going to be a lot better than the defenses he's seen in the Big 12 and Pac 12, where they kind of play some shootout games. It makes you wonder what his talent is really like when he's not allowed to run around in the pocket for 20 seconds trying to create some magic. That's not going to fly in the NFL. And I'd be really worried if I was a team drafting a quarterback about Caleb Williams after seeing some of these numbers on that. But moving on from that, last week we did an NFL power ranking. That seemed to go over pretty well. Got a lot of comments about that. People were kind of upset where I ranked some of their favorite teams, but most people thought, for the most part, where it mattered up top was pretty well in line there. So this week I'm actually going to do a top 25 college football poll. It's just mainly my own personal opinions on this. I didn't really poll anyone else. But it's going to look a lot different than the poll that you see in real life. And let's get right into it, starting at number one. And I actually have a huge shock for you at number one. I'm going to have the Washington Huskies. Yep. Georgia's been the consensus number one team all year long, in the coaches poll and the media poll, but not in my poll. I prefer Washington. You look at that what they've done this season. They're undefeated and they've taken care of business all throughout the season. This week they got a big win over Oregon, 36-33. They have a Heisman finalist quarterback, Michael Penix, as well as three elite receivers, multiple guys on the defense that will be drafted this year. Um, I just think, they have the best win of the season beating that Oregon team. They have a lot more good wins to come if they're able to take care of business in this gauntlet that is the Pac 12 conference play. Um, It's just hard for me, especially coming off this win against Oregon, for me to not have them at number one. Depending how some of these other teams do in the following weeks, I can see Washington maybe getting jumped for a week or two. Um, but ultimately, as long as you're in the top four, it doesn't matter a ton what your ranking is. I just prefer Washington as I think they were the best team this week. My number two team is actually going to be Michigan. Michigan, man, they are an absolute unit. They haven't played exactly tough competition this year, and that's a fair criticism of that so far. But when you haven't played elite competition, they're doing it the right way. They haven't allowed more than 10 points in a game, and they haven't scored less than 30 in any game. That's the way you should be when you play against bad teams. You shouldn't have any close games. You shouldn't have any sleepwalking games. And so far, Michigan hasn't done that. They've really taken care of business. Ever since Jim Harbaugh came back from his suspension, they've even taken another step up. Um, Michigan's a team to be scared of. Obviously, they've always had a good defense. They had for one for 10 years now, probably an elite defense. But this year, their offense is really stepping up as well. This might be the best quarterback play they've had in a while from J.J. McCarthy. Roman Wilson has been a pretty reliable receiver for him. Yeah, this Michigan team's something special thus far, and they're a real threat. And it looks like they're trying to go claim that first championship for Harbaugh after being so close for so many years. At number three, I'm gonna have Florida State. They're still undefeated, which you can't fault that for anything. However, their win over LSU is what's really carrying their resume. Obviously, anytime you're undefeated, your resume still looks good. But some of their wins, including against Boston College and Clemson, were probably a little bit closer than you would have liked. Uh, but at the end of the day, Jordan Travis is having a good year. He's not turning over the ball. And when you have a quarterback that's playing like that with no turnovers, it's pretty easy to win games when you're taking care of the ball. At number four, we have the Ohio State University. They probably should have lost to Notre Dame if we want to be honest, but they didn't. So we can't fault them for that. However, they do need to show me a little bit more dominance before I feel comfortable putting them over Florida State or Michigan. Um, while they are winning their games, it feels like at times they have kind of just skated by and haven't exactly made those statement wins like we'd like to see from these top teams. And then at number five is finally where the slide for the real life number one team in Georgia ends. Obviously, Georgia is still undefeated, but I think they're currently keeping that number one ranking due to winning it all last year. And that team is just not this year's team. They have a different quarterback. They've lost a lot of defensive players. While they are still a very competitive team, a very talented team, they are not last year's amazing team. Um, you look at their schedule, their what they've done so far. They haven't really blown out any teams. They've been relatively close games. They're not really covering the spread, which you're looking to win games, not cover necessarily. But like I said, it's those statement wins that matter the most, and Georgia hasn't done that. Um, they were able to take care of Kentucky pretty handily, which isn't too bad. But that Auburn game really kind of turned me off them a little bit as they looked very poor in that game. At number six, we're going back to the Big Ten for their third team in the top six, but it's totally deserving. When Penn State, every single game this season, Penn State has covered. But obviously, when you have games against Delaware, Illinois, Northwestern, UMass, you should be covering those games. So I can't really put them any higher than six at this current moment. However, you look at their team, Drew Allard's been a great quarterback. He's going to be a potential top five pick whenever he declares for the draft. Chop Robinson's been an elite defensive end product. Their left tackle, whose name I've never been able to say, Alu something or other. Man, I tell you what, I wish everyone's name could just be Joe Smith. But their left tackle's a top prospect in the draft this year. The Penn State defense has played tight football as well. Um, they're a team that I think definitely has potential to make the college football playoffs, depending how they do against teams like Michigan, Ohio State. But until those games roll around and we see how they do against real competition, six seems about the highest they could possibly be at this moment in time. And then at number seven, we have another undefeated team, although they feel almost like a sneaky undefeated team. You kind of forget they're out there, and that's Oklahoma. They got a nice win over Texas this week. Texas has kind of had the Big 12 shine for most of the year due to that win over Alabama. Uh, Despite that win against Texas, though, I will need Oklahoma to continue to have a little bit more statement games. The team's playing like they do every single year, a dominant offense, and the defense looks good in the first couple of weeks. Um, but I don't know. I just kind of feel like they have been taking a back seat to some of these other teams so far this season and haven't really done anything to generate the hyper attention quite yet. Despite Dylan Gabriel having one of his better starts to a season in a couple years now. Uh, Moving on to number 8, we have the Oregon Ducks. They had a loss that was almost a win. Honestly, like this loss should count just as much as a close win for them, honestly. Obviously, a loss is a loss, and you can't change that. But a 3-point loss at Washington, who I have personally as the number one team in the country, doesn't mean that you deserve to drop too far. They still have a great offense. Bo Nix is playing the best football of his career. The defense has actually been pretty solid as well for what you think of when you think of a Pac-12 team. Um, they have the gauntlet coming up. All these Pac-12 teams in the rankings have a chance to really jump or fall pretty quickly as the continued gauntlet play comes up, as most of the teams in the Pac-12 this year are pretty competitive. I probably have a couple teams that aren't ranked that maybe in a week or two could be ranked. But I'm not going to get into that quite yet, as we still have a lot more teams to work our way down. Um, at number 9, we actually do have another undefeated team, and that is going to be North Carolina. Um, I'm not. It's one of those things where they are undefeated, so you have to give them the respect they deserve, and that's why they're at 9. But I'm not sure that talent-wise they're the ninth best team in the country. Their defense isn't very great, and that's been a huge issue for me. They've, like I said, kind of been carried by the play of Drake May this season, and without that elite quarterback play, I'm not really sure where they'd be after that. At number 10, we have Texas. That is right, Texas. Lost this week to Oklahoma. I personally think their win over Alabama is a little bit overrated. Um, so they were kind of, that win over Bama really catapulted them. People are saying Texas is back. They got up to, I believe, as high as number 3 in the rankings. But the Red River rivalry game brought them back down to reality. Oklahoma got them there. But Texas still has one of the better defenses in the Big 12. 10 seems like a pretty fair ranking for them uh, after this week. At number 11, man, I can't believe I'm putting them this high. I got Oregon State. Um, I'm still not a fan of DJ Agamoli. I just don't have a lot of faith in him. What I saw at Clemson really deterred me from his talent. However, I can't fault them for winning games, and so far they've won games. They've beaten UCLA and they've beaten Utah, and those are two good wins that deserve to have them as close to the top 10 as they are. Moving down to number 12, I have Alabama. It's not very often you see Alabama outside of the top 10, uh, but I think this is probably the worst Bama team in 10 or so years. They're not blowing out any of their competition. They're not really looking dominant. The offensive line's not really as dominant as they have been in years past. They're allowing a lot of pressure, a lot of sacks. Jalen Milroe is not a very complete quarterback. Um, some weeks he looks like he can throw the football. Other weeks he looks like a predominantly running quarterback. Um, I just not getting a good read on Alabama right now. And while they are winning these games, I expect a lot more from them based on the reputation Bama's built up over the last couple of years. Dropping down to number 13, we have Notre Dame, the Fighting Irish. They rebound after a bad loss to Louisville, getting a good win over USC. They also have a nice win over Duke. However, they do still already have their two losses on the year with Ohio State and Louisville. You got to try to balance how good are those wins versus how competitive were those losses. Obviously, Louisville and Ohio State are two ranked teams, so you can't fault them too much for losing those games. However, this is about as high as I can justify a two-loss team at the moment, especially with some undefeated and one-loss teams underneath them coming up. One of those one-loss teams actually is here at 14, and that's Ole Miss. Ole Miss, they have a win over a sneaky good Tulane team. They have a win over LSU. It has these Ole Miss boys in the hunt. They're making some noise out there in the SEC, but they've already lost to Alabama, which hurts their chances of doing anything real big. If they had a game against Bama later on in the season, where they can win that, maybe get a chance to make more of a name by then. However, with that loss already on the resume, I'm not really sure what else they can do to make much more of an impression. I guess they just got to keep taking care of business and hope some things up top begin to collapse. At number 15, I have Duke. No Riley Leonard this week. No problem against NC State. Blue Devils used their best weapon, which was their defense, to hold NC State to 3 points. I can't fault them for the loss at Notre Dame. They've beaten Clemson pretty handily. Whenever Riley Leonard comes back, I expect Duke to find their role again. Not that they have lost it per se, but they are a better team, obviously, with Riley Leonard under center. I'm at number 16. I have USC, a big drop for them following a loss to Notre Dame. I touched on it earlier with my bad bets from the weekend. Caleb Williams struggles a lot against really good defenses. Not only that, they almost choked to Colorado with a late fourth quarter. Just was that fourth quarter in general. They just did not look like they really wanted to be there. And a lot of that is because of their awful defense, terrible defense, atrocious defense. And I just can't justify them any higher than 16 based on what I've seen from their defense. I would say the top 15 teams above them all have a better defense than USC. At number 17, I have LSU. Talent wise, LSU should be a top 10 team. I'd argue they might even have the best quarterback in the country with Jalen Daniels. Uh, However, they've lost 2 games already. They do have 2 nice wins against Mizzou and Auburn, both of which they scored almost 50 points. Those were the past 2 weeks, so that's helping them build up some momentum to reclimb up these polls. But they can't afford to have a third loss anytime sooner. They are going to fall out completely for several weeks there. At number 18, I have Louisville. The high of beating Notre Dame, followed by the low of losing to Pitt, says a lot about where we see Louisville at the moment. Um, Without that win over Notre Dame, they probably don't get ranked. Um, and this week they played Duke, and Duke's defense really good, as was Notre Dame's. If Riley Leonard plays, I think Duke will be the favorite to win that game. And if Duke wins that, Louisville will fall completely out of the rankings. So it was a nice little stint for them, and we'll see if they can keep their place in there or not. At 19, we have another SEC team that's going to be Tennessee. They're 5-1, but they haven't had a great schedule thus far. They lost to Florida. I'm not very high on Florida. However, they do play Bama, I believe, this week, and a win them could see. I think if they beat Bama this week, we'll see Tennessee jump into easily the top 15, maybe even the top 12. A 6-1 team with a win over Bama deserves that credit there, and obviously they beat Alabama last year. And number 20, I have Utah. They're coming off their best offensive game of the season, which allows them to stay ranked. If they struggled again offensively, I don't know if I could justifiably put them in the top 25. They've really struggled on that end of the ball, especially not having Cam Rising available to them. Uh, you know, if the offense can get going and find more consistency as the year goes along, I'll feel more, inclined to rank them higher. But until then, I can't really justify that anymore. At 21, an undefeated team alert. Undefeated team alert. Ding, 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 ding. Yup. At 21, we have Air Force. Um, Obviously, that's the reason that they are so low being undefeated is because, when you look at some of these mid-major teams, the resume doesn't stack up like these other top teams. However, they beat a tough Wyoming team. They haven't been in any threat of losing a game all year long. Been real controlling of the games thus far, and honestly, I don't really see any way in which they don't finish this season undefeated. Um, they'll need a lot of chaos above them to find a way to maybe sneak into the playoffs, kind of like Cincinnati did a few years ago. There's gonna need to be a lot of 2 or 3 lost teams in some of these Power Five conferences, which isn't. I don't think that's completely unlikely. You look at how good the Pac-12 is, how good the Big Ten is. I can see guys finding ways to lose a game or two. Um, but yeah, I think Air Force deserves to be ranked. I think they deserve the credit, and I'd like to see them honestly maybe be a bit higher. I just can't do that quite yet with where their resume stands. But as the winning streak continues to grow, we'll see how they rise. At number 22, I have Mizzou. Pretty good resume, wins over Kansas State, Memphis, and Kentucky. They were pretty damn competitive against LSU. This, like I said earlier, the best Tigers team I've seen in a long time, especially in the SEC. Probably the best Tigers team since Chase Daniels was there back in the Big 12. I don't think that this Tigers team finishes the season as an unranked team. I think they'll find their way to stay in the top 25 throughout the rest of the season. But right now, they're barely holding on at 22. But I think another win next week gets them probably about 18-ish, and they'll go from there. Number 23, we have Tulane had a nice win over Memphis this week. They're 5-1. However, their only loss was was to Ole Miss, which is the only real team they've played so far in terms of a Power Five school. But when you're a team that's not in a Power Five conference, I can't really hate on you for beating the teams that are in your conference and are on your schedule. So that is unless you're the number 24 team, and that's Iowa. And I will hate on you for beating the teams on your schedule because Iowa, you can't pass the football. You cannot pass the football. What type of team in the top 25 can't pass the football? These guys, I guess. I mean, in the Stanford Colorado game, Stanford's number one receiver had more receiving yards in the second half of that game than all Iowa wide receivers have had combined this season. And knowing that, I just can't, in good faith, put them any higher than 24. I understand they have one loss, but I mean, there's 252nd best offense in total yards, and people claim they're a defensive first team, but their defense is only 117th in points allowed and 67th in yards allowed. They're not a top 25 defense. They're playing a really bad Big Ten West. There's a real likelihood they could finish the year 11-1, and even then, if they are 11-1, I can't justify them any higher than 20th at best the way that offense plays. And then wrapping up the top 25 is number 25, Florida, the Gators. I am not high on Florida at all. This 25 spot was a toss up between UCLA and Florida. However, Florida is on a two-game winning streak rather than UCLA, who just came off a loss this week. I think UCLA has more talent than Florida does. But like I said, the two-game winning streak overpowers the loss this week. So Florida gets that last spot there. So let me know what you guys think about my top 25. Obviously, it's a lot tougher to do something like this mid season. There's a couple teams that are honorable mentions. James Madison's a pretty good team that maybe deserves some mention. Kansas just fell off this week, and then obviously I just mentioned UCLA. Washington State's another team that didn't make it that I'd like to give a shout out to as another competitive team there. And then Kentucky fell off this week as well after getting pounded there. So moving on, like I said, today's Wednesday. We usually film these on Tuesday, but since tomorrow is Thursday night football, I'm gonna get you guys a nice little Thursday night football preview here as the 4-2 Jacksonville Jaguars travel to the New Orleans Saints, who are 3-3 on the year. The line as of today is the Saints -1, and that is because Jaguars quarterback Trevor Lawrence is listed as questionable and more than likely will be out of this game with an injury. Uh, if he doesn't play, the Jaguars will have to turn to former Iowa quarterback C.J. Beathard. You saw what I just talked about for Iowa. That's been a lifelong thing for them of having no offense, so I don't love having an Iowa quarterback in there. Um, for the Saints, head coach Dennis Allen obviously is a defensive-minded coach, which is partially the reason the Saints are 3-3. Their defense, top five in the NFL in terms of yards allowed per game, and I believe also top five in points allowed per game. Um, the main goal for them will be able to stop Travis Etienne, who has scored two touchdowns in each of his past two games. That's going to be the biggest difference maker there. I don't know how much they'll trust Beathard to really throw it down the field, looking for guys like Kirk and Ridley. With that, I just don't know how much they trust his decision making. So I think they might try to rely on the run or these short dump off passes to ETN. So that's going to be the road to success if you're the Saints. For the Jaguars, their defense right now is in the bottom six in terms of sacks. However, Derek Carr's been sacked 17 times this season. That's either the sixth or seventh most this season. A lot of that is because he's had some poor decision making, hasn't really got rid of the ball, and has kind of just ate some sacks that he maybe should have thrown away. I think Carr needs to be more aggressive in throwing the football down the field, less checkdowns, more airtime with his throws. Um, but that could also be a little bit with how much time he's got in the pocket. Based on how poor the Jaguars defense has been in generating pressure, this should be a game that Carr should have good numbers in. And if he doesn't, it continues to have the red flags for what Carr is bringing to this Saints team. Ultimately, my official prediction is going to be the Saints 20, Jaguars 14. That's not going to be a play at all. I'm not going to be taking the Saints -1. I don't know if I have enough faith in that to put any money down on that. But I will favor the Saints 20-14 as my guess there. So that was today's episode. Hopefully, this will be coming out to you guys pretty soon here, mid afternoon on Wednesday. Make sure you guys leave a like on the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Friday, expect a pretty big UFC segment as we preview the upcoming UFC pay per view, headlined by Islam Makhachev defending the lightweight belt against the featherweight champion Alexander Volkanovski, and a great co main event featuring former welterweight champion Kamaru Usman versus the dangerous Khamzat Chimaev. Johnny Walker and Magomed Ankalaev also on the main card for a nice heavyweight fight. Uh, Good flyweight prospect Muhammad Mokaev faces Tim Elliott on the prelims. Um, there's a couple interesting fights throughout there. I'll have a lot more in-depth look at that come Friday, as well as my weekend plays. When something goes down, it's got to come back up, and I'm expecting to rebound on my plays this week, hopefully there. And the NBA is also right around the corner, so we have basketball coming up as well. I'm excited for that. We've had a lot of trades already go down. You know, you've seen Damian Lillard move teams. Same with Drew Holiday. James Harden might be moved here soon as well. So it's going to be interesting to see what these final rosters look like come tip off. So we will maybe do a little power ranking or a tier list NBA video here soon as well for that. But until then, guys, I hope you guys have a great week, and I hope you guys remember to stay blessed. I appreciate you guys.